We'll move on to the novice hurdlers. Willie Mullins bingo, left, right and centre. Not so much though with the Tatterstones Ireland 50th Derby Sale novice hurdle. Ballyburn just absolutely crushed the opposition over 2 miles. Willie Mullins has won 9 of the last 10 runnings of this race. Sir Gerard was an equally visually very impressive winner of it. Didn't go for the Supreme though. He went for the now Birmingham Bingham. And like the 2019 winner, Katie Young, he's got a very low head carriage. Classical Dream, bonkers low head carriage. He was almost eating blades of grass. Ballyburn is almost a clone of him in that regard, and he has that brilliant natural ability as well. What does that low head carriage mean, though?
I think, to be honest, I think he looks keener than he actually looks to the eye. I think that's just the way he is, and that's just the way he gallops. He gallops with his head out low and quite long. And like I said, this can just make a horse look keener than it actually appears to be. Paul had actually mentioned that as well, that people were kind of worried about how keen he is, but he seemed to think that he said that he isn't as keen as people are making him out to be. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for him this season. Like, it's just the way he gallops. I don't know if I'd like to be coming down to a fence on him with a head carriage that low, but that'll be something that we'll have to find out next year if it does affect him in that way. But yeah, it's just his racing style and it's effective for him. It doesn't seem to hold him back. He jumps very, very quick over his hurdles, so it doesn't affect his jumping in any way. He's effective over 2 and 2.5 miles. I just think he has kind of everything. I would be, as you suggested, the 2.5 would be the kind of ideal race for him going up into Cheltenham. I think he's the pace to go for the Supreme, but I don't know what it is. I just can't see him lining up there. I just think he has the barring Bingham written all over him. I just think he could be a standout horse for that race. I was kind of nailing it into his early on the podcast and the end of last year that you have to be forgiven for Willies with their first runs. Like, there's so much more to come from them off the back of their seasonal debuts. Like, you think he got beat on debut, Dancing City got beaten on debut, Fact File was another one that got beaten. Like this, and they're improving about 20 pounds from the back of their first run. It's just unbelievable. I think, just on a note for kind of maybe next season, don't be discouraged if this type of horse is getting beaten on debut. I think you're better off taking a punt on a horse like this, because he was probably a massive price for after he got beaten on debut for a race in Cheltenham. Like, we all know they're going to improve for their runs, and he's done that here, and he's improved significantly off the back of his 3 runs here. I know I keep bringing it up, but I think there is value at the start of the season with a few of Willie's that are maybe not winning on first time out, because Dancing City's done something similar here as well. But to me, going back to this horse, I don't think good ground would be a problem with him. I think the Punchestown bumper form is looking incredibly strong now as well, with Dancing City has now won a Grade 1 too, and Slaysdale has finished another good second behind Ballyburn here. So the form is really stacking up for this horse, and I think, I'm really excited for him going forward for the 2 mile 5. Can't really say much better things about him, to be honest.
I absolutely love the fact that Katie's saying I can't wait to see him over the 2 mile 5, as though it's already been decided and Willie Mullins bingo is just settled. But this will suit me, because I'm going to declare my bias here. I've backed him for the Bearing Bingham, and I backed him for it again before the weekend. So much to my chagrin, oh, look at George's face already. Much to my chagrin, loads of people then start coming and say, oh, Supreme, he's going to take all the beating in the Supreme. I don't think he will go there at all. As long as Mystical Power stays sound, he's going to run in the Supreme, and he will be a short price favourite for that, and Ballyburn will be a short price favourite for the Bearing Bingham. Can you say that about any other Willie Mullins horse? If they both go for the Supreme, like, Mystical Power is not stepping up to 2.5 miles now. So why would he take his 2 best novice hurdlers and run them both against one another in the Supreme? who could you point to from the Willie Mullins yard that's going to be 5-4 favourite for the Bearing Bingham? Reed and Tommy Wrong? Il Atlantique? No. So Mystical Power will go Supreme. Ballyburn will go for the Bearing Bingham. Discuss George Gorman.
Again, I should say I've very much got a horse in this race as well. I have backed him for the Bearing Bingham at 12s, but I backed him at 14s for the Supreme.
And you backed Slade Steele at what?
20s and 33s for the Bearing Bingham. So,
which we should say, Henry de Brum had said to Louis Hislop on Racing TV straight afterwards, well, we're going to go wherever he doesn't. So if he does go for the Bearing Bingham,
so
that's him going to the Supreme.
Goes for the Bearing Bingham. It's an absolute disaster. Yeah, but I need to have a look. I don't think I did have him for the Supreme. I think I had him for the Bearing Bingham or the Albert Bartlett Slade Steele off the back of his bumper stuff. So if he goes to the Supreme, it's an absolute nightmare. But look, if you take Willie Mullins Bingo out of it, I think this horse's best race would be the Supreme because of the premium it does put on stamina. I think you see year after year, like, you know, we have Faheen won the whatever it was called then, but the Bearing Bingham, and was it Vittor won the Supreme, and they ended up running over the complete opposite trips. Like, that used to be the way that Willie Mullins used to run these. And same with Appreciate It, won that race the other day at Leopardstown and ended up in the Supreme. You're going to use Sir Gerhard as the example of when that wasn't the case, and obviously is that the most recent? That is the most recent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which maybe shows that Willie
similar
Mullins
winning margin too.
Yeah, which might show that Willie Mullins is starting to lean the other way now. I certainly think Slade Steele's best trip will be the Bearing Bingham. I'm not sure I fancy him at all in the Supreme. Although, again, what's he gonna have to beat? Will he beat Mystical Power? He'd certainly beat Jericho de Repene. Firefox will be much better back at 2 miles. I think Slade Steele will be placed in the Supreme, but I think his best chance of winning a race is a Bearing Bingham. Again, if Ballyburn runs, he's probably running for second. But if he doesn't turn up, I think Slade Steele's the Bearing Bingham winner. So will he do the right thing, please? Because I'll cry if they go the wrong race.
I'm really sorry, but look, for those who have backed him for the Supreme, you could be right. I could be completely wrong about this. I might be overthinking it. This is Willie Mullins we're talking about. Willie Mullins thinks out loud, which is why people shouldn't report everything he said.
What we could do with Emerging is a horse that Willie Mullins is fearful will beat Mystical Power, but doesn't fear for Ballyburn. That's what we need. Because at the moment, it's just not deep enough. It looks winnable for Mystical Power, which means you're going to try and win it with your second best 2 mile novice hurdler. But
there is hope for you.
Yeah, we need something to emerge. For you. We can beat one of them and not the other.
Something like Mizor West or Tully Hill. Tully Hill's going to have another run. Yeah. He needs to improve his jumping massively. But let's say he does. Let's say he bolts up. Maybe he then becomes the one that they run in the Bearing Bingham. Maybe Mizor West absolutely bolts up and they decide, actually, he'll be suited to 2.5. Personally, I don't see it, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. Katie and I are both going for Bearing Bingham with Ballyburn. George is obviously very much in the Supreme camp. Which camp are you in? I haven't been doing this enough. I'm supposed to be saying comment below. Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll actually read out your comments as opposed to some of those American shows that say, hey, we want to hear your comments about who do you think is going to win the election. Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be Biden? They're both the same. Who cares? They're both the worst. Horrible people. But we will actually read out your comments as opposed to those political shows that ask for your comments to boost the algorithm but then never actually read them out. Just with a view to Far and Glory, he was pretty popular in the anti-post betting for some. He's found to have bled from both nostrils. Katie, so how worrying would that be with him with a view to the Cheltenham Festival?
It wouldn't look good. I was suspicious of how good that race, that Grade 1 Royal Bond was this year, and I did mention that I wasn't overly impressed by what he did that day. I know he probably would have went on to win that Aintree, that Grade 1 at Aintree on St. Stephen's Day, but he unfortunately fell. But yeah, and that doesn't bode well coming into Cheltenham off the back of that. Really disappointing run, and with only 4 weeks to go, it's pushing it tight now to be able to get him back to where he was. out of the other runners in this race, I'm going to pick out King of Kingsfield off a mark of 140. He didn't get put up for his efforts here in a Grade 1. I think he could be very, very competitive in one of those handicaps. And I think he could be one to keep an eye on. He looked as though he wanted to step up to 2.5. He was staying on again at the end. I think he could be one for the Coral Cup, maybe. I know he'll probably put up £5, leave him at a mark of probably 145. But yeah, he could be a lovely horse for a handicap coming into Cheltenham. Don't know if he'd be quite competitive enough going into the Supreme. He hasn't got an entry in the Barring Billingham. But yeah, could be a handicap horse coming into Cheltenham for him.
Brazil has been introduced at 16s for the Coral Cup. Is he headed there?
He ran the weekend, was a little bit disappointing, but yeah, probably maybe a step up and trip might suit him, but he'd have to really up his game to be competitive in that.
I return to Cheltenham Festival for him, horses for courses and all that. We know he can perform on the big day. Yeah. And on a line through Gaelic Warrior.
Yeah.
Obviously, he'd be a huge player, so I'd be interested in him. I didn't mind the run at the weekend too much at all. I think he'll be much better at Cheltenham. I'm desperately scrambling here to get a price for King of Kingsfield for the Coral Cup. I don't see one. I was interested in him for the county. I'm more interested in him, though, for the Coral Cup because of your point about him improving for a step up in distance, which could be very, very intriguing. And I haven't had a bet on any of the Cheltenham handicaps yet. There's a long way to go for those handicaps. If you found something, great, but I'm still looking. Dancing City, who was crushed by Ballyburn last year, he emerges victorious for Willie Mullins, who's already got Mystical Power, Ballyburn, High Class Hero, Tully Hill, Reading Tommy Wrong, Il Atlantique. Now include this fella as well, and a whole host of others to emerge. Willie is winning this race for the 6th time in the last 10 runnings as his dominance of the DRF continues. George, what did you make of Dancing City? He was given a kind of Manila Cocooner ride by Danny Mullins, who was just on fire on the day.
Yeah, no, it was an excellent ride, wasn't it? And obviously, Katie spoke about just now. It's a great advert for that bit of punch down bumper form. He wasn't. I don't know. I don't know if he'd want to step up in 3 miles. Like, you see, he did get home well, but he's horse with a lot of speed. Like, I think like this 2 mile 6 race, I wouldn't know the stats on it, but it tends to be faster sort of horses in this. They tend to be more 2 mile 4 horses stepping up to 2.6 than they are 3 mile horses stepping down to 2.6, because very simply, horses that are looking at winning an Albert Bartlett, I just don't think would lay up in this. Little disappointing from Jetara, but she's a fair yardstick. I think I would
gone wrong for Rachel as well. One of the, I think her stirrup broke.
Yes, something like that.
No, she didn't.
She
got it back in. Just lost it.
Yeah. But I don't know where it went, because there was no. It was a fair way after a hurdle, wasn't it? Maybe she moved to the horse maybe made a mistake or something. She's gone to her toe, gone a few strides, not realizing she's on her toe, and her foot slipped out or something. I don't know, but I'd actually I'd give that horse an each way chance if it rocked up in the regular mare's hurdle rather than the mare's novices hurdle. She does have an entry in the regular, in what's it called, the David Nicholson mare's hurdle at 25 to 1. She'd have to improve a fair way to get anywhere near Lossiemouth, but I could see her running in. Like, I'll probably wait until the extra places on the day and play her like that, maybe like 5 places, something like that, because realistically, Gala Marceau, Ashro Diamond, Lossiemouth are going to be out of her league, but she can well plug into a 5th or a 4th at 25 to 1. I wouldn't fancy her at all down to 2 miles in the mare's novice now. Like, she probably doesn't have that sort of pace, but yeah, so
she'd be lapped.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know how many days it is since Jessica Harrington trained a winner?
Like, it's a ridiculous amount of time, isn't it? I was going to say May, but that's not right.
Well, normally she'd get some bit of respite.
Well, Jetara won a few weeks ago,
yeah.
didn't she? Yeah.
Christmas.
Jetara is her last winner. She's had 6 winners from 67 runners so far this season over jumps. It's 59 days since she trained a winner at Dundalk. Normally Fundalk would be a bit of respite. It's 38 days since she trained a winner over jumps. Just something to bear in mind. Her horses just aren't firing at the moment. So I think Jetara ran really well. I didn't fancy Jetara at all at the weekend, and I thought she ran much better, particularly given what happened with Rachel as well. So I would very much mark her up with a view to the Mare's Hurdle. Predator's Gold, Katie, interestingly enough, second in a Grade 1 for the second consecutive run, but he will form part of Willie Mullins' run team for the Bearing Bingham. Maybe that will be Paul Townend's ride. Maybe there's an indication that Ballyburn will go for the Supreme. I don't think so. But what do you think of Predator's Gold for the Bearing Bingham?
Yeah, I think it could be a good shout there. I was actually doing a little bit of digging today, and interesting to note, Dancing City got an official rating of 151 off the back of this run, an RPR of 152 from 123. And more interestingly, Predator's Gold run to an RPR of 150 from 140, which he received behind Coldwell Potter in the Grade 1 at Christmas. Coldwell Potter only received an RPR of 149 that day. So, and he went on to make 740,000 today at sales. So, do you know, interesting.
And on RPR, Predator's
Very.
Gold's improved passing.
Yeah. Just something I picked up on today, just looking through Coldwell Potter's form and where he kind of stood, kind of where he might have finished in the 2.5 or 2 mile 5 or the 2 mile. And just going off the RPRs, because that's all we have kind of to play with here. Like, I don't know if he would have, where he would have fared here behind Willie's. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he ran this weekend and would have got beaten. I know it's a big shout.
Oh, I
but I don't know if he would have beaten Dancing City, or definitely don't think he would have beaten Ballyburn, that's for sure. But just something interesting.
No, I would agree with you. I would very much agree with you, Katie. Just, you were there at the sales today, so that's a record price for public sale. There's plenty of horses who've been sold privately for well over £1 million, including Ara Connor, who was a terrible loss for Barry Connell, but Ara Connor was famously connected to the Final Furlong podcast through Noel Hayes back in the day. Do you think that 740,000 is a wise investment as he makes his way over to Paul Nicholls, and do you expect him to run at Cheltenham?
I'm 50-50 on this, because I thought he was going to make around 750 was kind of the figure in my head that he would have made, just off the back of the fact that there's point-to-pointers making around 500,000 and they haven't even set foot on the track yet, and this horse has won the Grade 1 over 2 mile and kind of was crying out for a trip anyway. So the fact that he's actually managed to win a Grade 1 over 2 miles speaks volumes for him. However, he's a gelding, and they've paid 740,000 for him and moving him over to England. I think he wants soft ground. I think the key to him is soft to heavy ground and a trip. He's more likely to get this side the water over an island. I just can't see him being as effective in the UK as he would be in Ireland ongoing wise, and the way the calendar runs. I hope he goes on to be incredibly. I hope he does do well for Connections, because they've invested an awful lot of money into a horse that is basically a gelding, has no future career after this. But I'm just skeptical on where he would have fared if he had ran this weekend, and if he had ran this weekend, would he have made? And he maybe have finished in behind a couple of these. Would he have even made half of what he made today? It's just something to note. But I think he will be a better horse over fences in time, and that is something to keep in mind. And I think Connections have bought him with that in mind, with the future career of fence. And from what I can gather, is that they're not too worried about what he does this season over hurdles. So that is something to bear in mind. They've also suggested that it is only 4 weeks away from Cheltenham now, and they want to ensure that he has plenty of time to settle into his new home. So I'd be very surprised if they turned up to Cheltenham with him. I think they'd probably maybe aim for Aintree, all being well with him. But yeah, I could see Cheltenham being off the cards with him.
Well, if they look at the time form ratings, which I'm sure they did, which would have in some way influenced their decision to go and pay this massive amount of money for him, Ballyburn on adjusted figures is 167 time form. officially he's still 157p. Coldwell Potter is 161p, and the highest rated novice hurdler according to Timeform's figures. So you could look at those figures and say he'd have run a big race at the weekend in either of the two races. But that's the ratings opinions. I'm not so, like I'm a big believer in Timeform, and I find them very, very useful. Wouldn't be so sure he'll go to Cheltenham, and it's different training techniques, different training methods as well. As you say, he has to settle in to ditch it. We'll see. I'd say Gordon's gutted to lose him, obviously. But if you've backed him anti-post, you're gutted, because you'd much prefer to have him in Gordon's system as opposed to being switched to somebody else. Paul's a fantastic trainer, obviously. And what a terrible loss they suffered over the weekend, dearie me. But look, we shall see how that plays out for them. Just an intriguing one, that one of the highest rated hurdler that was going to go to the DRF didn't line up, and what role would he have played behind Ballyburn and Dancing City? Let us know in the comments below if you think he would have been involved in the finish. Predators Gold, though, heading to the Bingham, and Dancing City headed to the potato race. Triumph Hurdle, it's a 1-2-3-4 for Team Willie Mullins. Again, Danny Mullins in the saddle, and for the second year in a row he wins for Kenny Alexander after the win of Gala Marceau in this race last year. This is another race that Willie Mullins is winning for the 6th time in the last 10 years. I'm a huge admirer of Willie Mullins. I think what he's doing is incredible. Nobody could have envisaged, like, there has been dominant trainers of the past. Aidan O'Brien, Syed bin Saror, now Charlie Appleby, Vincent O'Brien back in the day, now Aidan O'Brien. Nobody could have envisaged that one trainer would have the facilities to be able to house all of these horses and would be able to attract the sheer quantity of the biggest owners in racing, all flocking to him, and him able to cater to each and every one of them and balance all of those egos around. It's phenomenal. Is it good for the sport? No, it's not. But it's something to be admired, for sure. Kargese, can she beat Sir Gino? George Gorman.
No, absolutely not. Fantastic, like, great for the mare. She's got a grade 1 in her CV now, but she's nowhere near Sir Gino, is she? I think on RPRs they've said she's run to 127. Obviously she gets her mare's allowance, but I just don't think that's anywhere near Sir Gino. I think the one I'd take out of the race with a view to the future would be Mashborough. Like, he was stunning. Like, I think Ruby Walsh was telling anyone who would listen all week, like, he's like one of the best looking horses you'd ever see. He's all over a chaser, and like you could see like what they normally want, a chaser like a sort of future potential staying chaser. They need a good gallop to run at to actually bring their stamina into it. What impressed me for this horse, for his first run out of France, he was actually able to make that gallop for himself. Like, he was honest, he was switched on, he was focused, and he was able to make a strong enough gallop to actually drag himself into the race. And quite interestingly, I think in his one run at Auteuil, he beat, what's the name of the horse? The Batman Girac. He beat by 10 lengths, which I think Carlo Conti beat earlier this season by 5 lengths. So, they all improve at different rates at this sort of age. But you could say from that perspective, like, the writing was on the wall a little bit with regards to their finishing positions in this race. But massively, I'd be really enamoured with him. I look forward to seeing what he presumably does over fences next year, unless they try and keep him a novice for a novice hurdling campaign next year. But I can't really see. Oh no, of course he won in France, so he won't be a novice next year anyway. But
he won a beginner's race over hurdles in France, though.
You have to go chasing, don't you? I'd be really interested in him next year. As regards to the others, they're admirable horses, but in terms of what we're looking for here, none of them are going to beat Sir Gino.
Yeah, I don't think any of them will beat him either. Although Kargese is interesting, and he'll have to give her a weight, to be fair, and she might very well be able to step up again. As Adam Mills, who was on the show last week, was talking about, she was very, very keen on her hurdling debut for Willie Mullins, and she was not keen at all in her races in France. So she settled much better. Maybe she can step forward from this and go and win. She'd certainly have each way claims. I see this a little bit differently to George. I very much agree with him in Mashborough, Katie. I think he's the most interesting long-term prospect, and insert cliche about him being a chaser for the future. I am again biased here, but I really like the performance from Bunting. He's jumped horribly, but he stayed on very strongly towards the end. And on the new course in Cheltenham, where the emphasis is on stamina more so than speed, I could see him faring best to the Mullins horses. But they will all have to start now to beat Sir Gino if he runs his race.
Yeah, I can't see any of these really troubling should Sir Gino in regards to Cheltenham. I think he's just a standout juvenile so far we've seen the season, and I think he put 20 lengths between the rest of these on ratings at the minute. Just to touch on what George says about Kargese's RPR rating, it was the lowest RPR rating that has won this race since 2015, which doesn't quite bode well. Like you look at the likes of Sir Eric, he got a rate RPR of 146 off the back of winning this. I think that was in 2019. Calixios was 144, Vauban 144, Garda Masu was 139 last year. So just off the back of that, it's just something interesting to note. She's definitely not high enough in the ratings for me coming into Cheltenham to be troubling like Sir Gino. But like George said, Marshborough is kind of the horse to take from this in the long term. I just think they threw him right in at the deep end here. Putting him in a grade 1 on Irish debut is a tough ask. And then making the running on Irish debut in a grade 1 is an even tougher ask. And he actually wasn't beaten all that far to the line. I think what he lacks is a little bit of tactical speed that Kargese had here at the weekend. He just didn't have that turn of foot. I think he's an out-and-out galloper, and we won't see the best of him until probably we see him over a fence. But with regards to Cheltenham, the Cheltenham could suit him down to the ground. A stiff finish at the end. They go good gallop. I said he just might outstay a few of these on the day, and I'm sure he'll improve from this run as well. The only thing I just have in the back of my mind with him is he might not get the chance to bounce out and make the running like he did here at the weekend. That kind of played into his hands because Mark could just let him bowl out in front. He wasn't keen. He wasn't in a fight with him. He jumped beautifully the whole way around. But he did have a hood on his debut in France, and be interesting to see whether they do reapply that going forward this season. If he does turn up in Cheltenham, I'm not sure what plans are, but I don't think Connections have another entry in the Triumph. So I'm assuming that would be the plan off the back of this, because he does deserve to take his chance there. But I think out of all these, he'd be the one to follow home Sir Gino out of everything that ran that race.
Ooh. Interesting. Okay. I was thinking of him more as a chaser to look forward to, but which is obviously what Sir Gino is going to be in time as well.
But as George said, like they wouldn't be able to keep him as a maiden for next year. So would they take their chance at Cheltenham? Because where else would he run now? He'd have to take another chance in the grade 1.
I'd say obviously I don't know anyone to do with the horse, but I would have thought if it came up quick like it can do at Cheltenham, they wouldn't take him. He's a big horse. And I worry on quicker ground when he's not able to make the running. Like you said, he jumped brilliant, but he was a little chasery, and I just wonder he was able to take his time and think about his hurdles in front. And I think if something's giving him a lead and he can't lay up, it might be a little more of a problem than it was at the weekend. Like I said, I really, really like this horse with a view to going chasing. You can see him when he's jumping a hurdle. You can see the mechanics of he's really loading up his back end every time he jumps, like you do for a fence. Whereas a lot of these juveniles just sort of flick through the top of their hurdles. This horse is already making a shape to jump a fence over hurdles, which you really don't see very often on their first run in Ireland or England or wherever. He's obviously been very well schooled, but I'm really looking forward to him. I couldn't back him in a Triumph or even a Fred Winter though. I just worry that if he'd be a bit run of his feet on better ground. If it came up soft, then you might be talking.
Which
Well,
it
to
could
back
happen.
up Katie, Emma Nagel was saying that of all the juvenile hurdlers that Willie was talking about at the start of the season, this is the one he was pointing towards as potentially the best one. It does worth repeating, though, that he was saying that Ethical Diamond was his best juvenile hurdler going into the Christmas meeting. And then obviously that has not worked out well at all. He's been sent off a 40-1 shot and been lapped. And he was also saying in the parade ring after this race that the intention was for Kargese to make the running. Then she doesn't do that. Mark ends up having to make the running. And he was like, well, see, we don't even know what we're doing. So Willie Mullins, humble in victory as well as defeat. The first four for Willie here all look set to go to the Cheltenham Festival. Just bear in mind that Ferryhouse is a lot closer this time around for the Easter Grand National meeting because Easter is in March as opposed to April. And Gordon was talking about going up in distance with Caliconti, coming out of Juvenile Company and going for a graded hurdle over 2 mile 4, I think. Might be the race Nick Rocket won last year. I think that's what he's looking to do with her. Very briefly, George, Peking Opera transferred from Ballydoyle to the bigger, more powerful Gary Moore stable and has improved for that switch in trainers. He switches to hurdles, makes a hurdling debut. He said the cruelest cut of all. He's gelded. He ran really well for Aidan last year. He was 4th in the Irish Derby behind Augusto down at the Curragh. He's gone to Royal Ascot. He ran in the Grand Prix de Paris. He was 3rd in a grade Group 3 behind Vauban. I'm still thinking jumps racing. You must have been really pleased with the winning debut.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, he's well tried for such a young horse. There was always a bit of worry, like how much was going to be left by the time he got to us. But obviously Aidan and Ryan rides pretty much all of Hayden's, and you'd like to think that he wouldn't steer us onto a wrong one because of that, but you never know. But he's jumped very well since the day he got with us. My only thing with him, I've ridden work on him once. I've ridden work against him once. The horse I actually rode work against him on was Bridge, who won on Boxing Day at Fontball, who's, I think he's rated 104, 103 over hurdles. Like, he wouldn't knock your eye out home. He wouldn't disappoint you. But he'd just work 2 things. You never really know what you're sitting on. Like, he just work 2 of them, and then that's it. Like, I think you could probably work with the best horse in the yard, worst horse in the yard, and they work exactly the same. So we were a little not sure what to expect. We hoped we had a good one, and especially in receipt of all that weight, you sort of had to have asked questions if he hadn't been able to go and do the business. But he did. A couple of scrappy jumps on the way around. He'll have learnt a lot, and if anything, the Adonis might be a bit easier next time after running against such vastly more experienced horses here. Like that, the horse that finished 2nd, the horse I really, really like, he won by a country mile at Fontball last time out. And there's some of these horses here have won 2, 3 races. Admittedly, they've given away weight to him. But it'd be nice for him, I think, next time to run against sort of fellow juveniles.